Welcome to Longevity Industries' presentation of the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I am your host, Dean Phillips. I'd like to thank our sponsor today, the Precision Metal Forming Association and the PMA's Educational Foundation, for all of their great work. I have the distinct pleasure of having Roberta Nelson Shea with me today. She comes to us from Universal Robots, where she is the Global Technical Compliance Officer. Welcome, Roberta.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to the wonderful world of robots.
Excellent. And speaking of robots, tell us a little bit about your company and your background.
Okay, sure. Universal Robots was one of the forefront leaders of a technology called collaborative robotics. And what that means is they came into the marketplace with a robot that has a number of integrated safety functions such that it will stop if it senses some resistance, or it will stop if it is going to exceed a particular speed, or all sorts of variables, but all of these being very tightly integrated into the robot itself. So rather than take a robot and add some safety functions, this is a robot from the very conception of the product included safety functions to enable its use in what's being called collaborative applications. So oftentimes our sort of robot, and as well as competitors' robots, are called collaborative robots. But for those of us in the manufacturer's shoes, we shudder a little bit at that, because while we do make robots that can be used for the purpose, we don't know if the application will be safe when itself, let alone our robot. So our robot can be safe, but it doesn't mean the application is.
Right.
But once, the term got out there in the marketplace, collaborative robot, it's very difficult to, reel it back in. It's out there and it's going to stay out there no matter how much of those of us in the safety arena cringe and say, well, it's the application. It's the application.
I understand 100%. I'm not sure if all of our audience does, but whenever you have something occupying the same space as a person or potentially occupying it, there's always room for some caution that has to be applied. And it is not easy always to say that you've built it with a safety aspect in mind. And after a certain point, it becomes the responsibility of the owner. Same in all of manufacturing. At the end of the day, it's the manufacturer's use that defines it. Presses for years have been that way, that companies say, we don't have to put light curtains on it because we don't ship any tools. So there's nothing to be protected from until you put a tool in it. And
well, I happen to think that's a little disingenuous, to be quite truthful.
I understand.
I can say from the standpoint of robot manufacturers, so I'm going to speak broadly and on behalf of all of my colleagues. We tend to be very careful when saying our robots have capabilities. Those capabilities can be used correctly, or they could be used inappropriately. And that's really the distinction more than anything else. You can take a tiny, tiny little robot, and there are some that exist that have payloads of a half a kilo. I mean, this is nothing. And if you were to take a very lightweight knife and put it into the end effector of that robot, no one can say that is safe.
Right.
So that's just to bring home the fact that the application really dictates suitability for a person to be not only in close proximity, but potentially contacting the robot. But we now have the technology that allows for this and enables it, and that's really the very exciting thing.
Right.
And you're seeing more and more of these in the industrial space. It's been out probably the longest, and we're learning more and more about how to apply it well, to instruct people how to use it well, and we're seeing more and more applications that, quite frankly, I'm astounded by the creativity of everyone out there trying to solve application needs and trying to get products within a workplace to aid them in doing what they do, whatever that might be. So it's really very exciting.
Sure.
In the forefront, from a standards viewpoint, there's a revision underway for the robot safety standards for the robot and for its integration or system or application. And it's rather a large revision. Didn't appear to be that initially, but once you jump into the pool, you find out you're in the deep end. But I think it will be a great improvement, and it will offer a lot of clarity to topics that we thought were addressed well, but you only find out that there's confusion when you get into using them. So that's one thing that's happening, and that's a good thing. Right. The revisions will be out in 2021, which seems like a long time from now, but if you think about it, we're just at the beginning of 2019, so that's not very far off. From a technological standpoint, we're seeing the prospect of all sorts of robots outside of industry. And examples to that end are for service robots, meaning this might be a household servant sort of robot that aids a person who might have limited mobility by being able to bring objects, such as a glass of water or something like that. And this is an area of a great deal of interest as well as scratching of heads, because how do you design something that is going to be able to lift common objects, but also then not hurt someone? Mm-hmm. And how does it know the difference between the vial of pills that are good for you or the vial of rat poison pills?
Right.
And so that comes to mind that it's not just then what that robot can do, but how do you design the household so that there will not be issues in the use of it? That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Another thing that's getting a lot of attention it would be the tools that are used at the end of a robot arm. Sometimes they're called end-of-arm tooling. No big surprise. Sometimes they're simply called end effectors.
Right.
But no matter what, it's an attachment to a manipulator. We're seeing a lot of design and technology going into end effectors right now. And the design and technology has to do with the capability of grasping various different objects and doing it well and possibly without bruising. So if you want to think about what does it take to pick a tomato from a plant, you have to pull it hard enough, but not so hard that you squish it. And this is really different than what had been traditionally done in industry. In industry, you'd have your end effector, and you'd want to make sure that it would hold on to something so tight, but not so tight you broke the object.
Right.
So you're really just before breaking the object or deforming the object or marring the object. Yet when you get into some of these newer applications, you want to grasp the object with just enough force and pressure, but no more than that, because you could damage it. Or you could possibly hurt a person if a person's fingers were in the way. So we're going from the very easy things to handle, and maybe you could even say handle a little bit crudely, to many more applications where very fine handling is needed, whether it's for the product quality or life, meaning you don't want to break it, or for the purpose of safety. So I view that that's probably the big new front that we're facing right now, and it's the fact that we're going to see a lot of technological improvements.
Right.
Now, if we look at our standard old robots, I can tell you that even if it's the most recent of design, an example might be, our own universal robot. But if you look all around to all robots, you see that all manufacturers are trying very hard to get their robots to be very easy to program and use. So right. we're all striving to take the training factor away. It is still typical for large industrial robots that in order to use it, there could be training required that takes weeks in order to be able to, properly program the robot. And in comparison, the interest within users in getting automation equipment, they don't want to have to spend all this time to train their people. They want to be able to get the equipment in and just start using it. So we've all challenged ourselves, how could we make robots easier to use? And in the case of our robots, somebody can learn all they need to know watching a few and participating in a few online training sessions for a couple of hours. And we've actually got many customers that just take our robots, unbox them, plug it in, and just start using it because there's no coding. It's very graphical. But that's what everybody is trying to go to. And everybody, for whatever they've got, even if it is easier to use than what was out there before, the challenge is to make it even easier to use because that means fast deployment.
Yeah, I agree 100% on that because in the Lego competitions where they use the Lego robots, the Mindstorm, it's very graphical, very simple in common language so that the students can get to the point where they're excited about it, not bored by trying to spend 8 hours of writing code.
Right.
And I don't think that employees in manufacturing want to spend 8 hours learning code any more than, 10, 12, 14-year-old kids,
That's right. Not only is it the issue of getting the training, but if any specialized training is required, if you don't use it and use it often, it disappears. And typically, robots are used to automate something.
Right.
So sure, it could be changed once a day, but I will bet that 80% of the applications run for at least a week, 2 weeks, maybe even a month. So if you then say, okay, I got it all running, and a month later you come back and say, I'm supposed to change something, how did I do this last month?
Right.
So it's not just ease of use once, but repeatedly without requiring additional training or competency, because that's the challenge of every employer now. They have employees that they need to have do many tasks with many different sorts of equipment and many different user interfaces. And in order to be able to wrest the benefits of the technology, they have to be able to deploy it quickly. So I think the challenge is on to everyone.
Roberta, in the next 5 years, what do you envision will be the greatest area of change? Do you feel like it's more in the end effector customization, in the programming, or in the actual applications that we're going to find?
Wow, I've really been, it's been difficult for me to forecast the future because if I could do it really well, I'd be rich. And I find I'm always surprised, pleasantly surprised, I might say. So I think in the next 5 years, what we're going to see is safety going outwards and towards more aspects of automation. So one point in time for a robot, the safety of the robot was really it being able to do what was called a safeguard stop or a protective stop, an emergency stop, nothing else. Well, now you can have robots that have a force limit, meaning the amount of force that it will exert, because the presumption is if it exerts any more than that, it's doing something it's not supposed to do, which could also mean contact with a person. It can include motion limits. It can include momentum limits, speed limits, stop time limits, stop distance limits. And what I mean from a safety standpoint, it means they won't be exceeded.
Right.
So that's been a tremendous improvement possible with robots. We're going to see more safety embedded in end effectors because right now, from an end effector standpoint, we've only looked at them as open-close. We've never said, oh gosh, do we have to worry about it closing? Well, we do if we're going to crush a finger. Oh, do we have to worry about it opening? Well, we do if it's got a piece of sheet metal and it's going to let it fly. So there's been not as great examination of some of these things as is happening right now. And so I think that will drive not only improvements in operation and functionality, but also safety. And I'd say the other area is just what I mentioned earlier, the whole ease of use. 5 years from now, I'm expecting the products to be much easier to use. You know, you've probably heard people talk about, why can't I use my cell phone and program this? Well, there's challenges associated with it, and in some instances, concerns like cybersecurity.
Yep.
But the reality is, the market is clamoring to be able to have this sort of technology available for its use and for the use of this technology to have reasonable safeguards. And I mean that from cybersecurity as well as from the standpoint of not making mistakes that could hurt people. So that's a new frontier. And another new frontier that is being worked on, and there's currently, they really are not the sophisticated products yet, but I'm expecting announcement sometime over the next 5 years about 3D safety monitoring that interfaces between equipment and monitoring of people. So in that instance, you could take, for example, any robot. Let's even say that it's a 250-ton robot. And this 3D safety system is completely aware of wherever the robot is, as well as any intrusions into the area the robot is operating. And it will then tell the robot safely to move in another direction or to slow down, because it has to maintain a minimum separation distance for whatever the speed is that it's operating. This would be equivalent to people being able to walk around all over a factory floor with robots, and there's no cages at all, regardless of how large the robot is. And that is fascinating.
Yeah.
But we're not quite there yet. But I know a number of companies are working on it.
Yeah, I've heard that from several companies, Nissan being one of the ones that I've spoken to, because they have deployed just such a huge quantity of robots, and they anticipate that to grow at least by double in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's an incredible time technology-wise for that. Do you feel that the need or the lack of workforce development that we've had up until now has contributed to this larger desire for robots?
Absolutely. I know from testimonials of customers of Universal Robots, the response has been they haven't been able to find employees.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not talking about for any particular skill level, even completely unskilled.
Right.
And so therefore, being able to deploy automation that's easy to use is the only way that they can have higher output, because they can't find anybody to hire. So it's not so much a burden of the cost of automation, it's the fact that they can't get any new employees. Mm-hmm. They're just not there.
Yeah.
And because everybody wants to be designing video games or computer games. That's really where a lot of attention is.
Yeah.
But, there's all sorts of people needed for jobs that are in the manufacturing arena, and it doesn't have to be the old dirty factory of the past, although we still have plenty of those, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, yes, there's a great deal of automation and use of robots, really because the people are not available to do jobs to allow expansion. And so then automation has to come in to enable expansion and higher productivity with the same people they already have, because they can't get more. And I've heard that time and time again. There's always some sensational statement of robots are taking away jobs. I have never seen that. And I know even many years ago, Harley Davidson made a decision to start using robots, and they guaranteed to their workforce, we will not lay anybody off because we automate. Now, over the years, their production expanded and expanded and expanded, and the people they had, they got to reuse in other areas, other work, or train them to be higher skilled for the new automation that came in-house. But there were no layoffs of anybody because of automation, and I think that that's a sensational thing to say, but really not true at all.
Yeah, I would agree. In most of the places that I've ever gone into, it's been just the opposite. They've had to hire additional people. They may shift people from being in one role to another, but I've never seen it where the robot has eliminated to any real extent a plant to where you just have a plant full of robots running around. It just, there's still a need in all different types of manufacturing for workers. There just is, and this just alleviates some of the nightmare that people have had of trying to find and keep good people. It's been a huge challenge. I've spoken to some of the HR personnel, and what they've said time and time again is that the turnover rate is so high and they can't keep people. When you get down to 3 and 4% unemployment levels, you're just fighting everybody for just somebody that will show up. And
it's the nightmares that I hear out there. Yeah.
In the technology area that you're in, what are some of the biggest challenges technology-wise? Do you feel it's more on the safety side? Is it more identifying and understanding new applications?
I unfortunately, I don't think I can answer that. My field is safety, so that's what consumes me.
Right.
And that also means that I've got blinders on to some other things.
Sure.
The application side is something that our people in the field see more of than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would not do that question any justice, I'm sorry to say.
No, I appreciate your honesty.
I'll repeat what I said before. I'm absolutely amazed at the creativity and ingenuity of our customers, because I see and hear of one application after another that I just say, wow, that's clever.
Yeah, all you have to do is spend about 20 minutes searching for robots on YouTube, and you'll find some of the most amazing ways people have problem solved using robots, even to the things of like Roomba competitions and things like that. It's phenomenal where we are today. What can education and our educators do in the future to help with robotics and help us get more familiar people as they come out of school with this technology?
Well, you mentioned a great tool to this end, and that's the Lego challenge. And the whole robot and the first foundation, I think is what it's called. And even my son was involved in that in high school for the robotics challenge. I think that's fabulous, and it would be great if it could be expanded. I know at our headquarters, they're regularly, at least a couple of times a year, the company hosts visits by local schools. So starting from kindergarten age and up, classes come in, and what's set up is, table after table after table with robots and end effectors and various things that can be done with them. And we watch the children just go at it, and they love it. So as it relates to robots, it's typically not as difficult to get some degree of interest. And the reason I say that is that everybody thinks a robot's cool. The word is cool.
Right.
So that same thing doesn't happen if somebody were to say, well, I've got a CNC machine here, and you're going to have every kid's eyes roll in the back of their head, which is unfortunate when you think that that was the precursor to a robot. So I don't know what to say for education, and now that I have adult children, I've kind of lost touch with all of it, so I would hate to suggest anything, because I'm sure I'll be absolutely positively wrong.
Well, I appreciate all of your support and everything that you're doing for manufacturing and for our industry. We're just about out of time, so I wanted to thank you very much for being here today, Roberta. It's been my pleasure, and I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Precision Metal Forming Association, and the PMA's Educational Foundation for helping us put on the show. Everybody go out and have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and everybody have a great 2019.